Egypt will build the largest artificial river in the world if Ethiopia doesn't stop them. These 10 rows of 3-meter wide pipes will take water from the Nile to a patch of desert land that will become the new Nile Delta. That's a 9,200 square kilometer patch of land, which is exactly the same size as the land area of the island of Cyprus, and it all starts at the Rosetta Branch of the Nile. Egypt will build the first of 2 artificial rivers by repurposing the Rosetta agricultural wastewater and using it to irrigate the new Nile Delta. Usually that water would just flow into the Mediterranean, but now the water will branch off into a new artificial river. Heading westward along the Mediterranean coast, the river will flow for 50 kilometers, 31 miles, and reach the edge of the Nile Delta. There, 10 rows of pipes that are 3 meters in diameter will be installed underground, taking the water 22 kilometers, 13.6 miles inland to the nearest patch of desert. By moving the water underground, Egypt ensures the project will not interfere with any farmland along the coast. Once the pipes reach the desert, they will resurface and travel further south for an additional 42 kilometers, 26 miles, before reaching Al Hammam water treatment facility. The plant can treat 7.5 million tons of water every single day. The second artificial river will be much smaller and be only 42 kilometers, 26 miles long. The river will be located 25 kilometers to the east of the first river, taking water directly from the upstream Nile. Again, part of the river will be flowing underground using rows of pipes, because they don't want the riverbed to interfere with the nearby farmland. Once the 2 rivers are complete, they will irrigate an area of 4,200 square kilometers. But that's just the beginning. Over the years, the irrigation system will expand and cover an additional 5,000 square kilometers for a total area of 9,200 square kilometers. That will be roughly half the size of the natural Nile River Delta. If complete, this project will become the largest and most expensive agricultural project in Egyptian history, increasing the country's current agricultural land by 23% from 39,700 square kilometers to 48,900 square kilometers. The new Nile Delta is located strategically near ports and roads, while the Dava corridor cuts straight down the middle of the project. Now, this land will be used to grow mainly wheat and corn, but also veggies, fruits and herbs. Food-producing facilities will be constructed nearby, and Egypt will solve its import food problem, which is the main reason the government is investing 300 billion Egyptian pounds or $9.7 billion into this agriculture mega project. Today, Egypt holds the title of the most populous country in the Arab world. Its current population stands at 113 million, and in the next 25 years, its population is expected to grow to 160 million. The 42% increase in population wouldn't be a problem if Egypt had enough farmland to produce the food at home. Because of the country's geographical position, 96% of Egypt is a desert. Only 4% of the land up the riverbed of the Nile is suitable for agriculture. But that's only part of the problem. You see, thousands of cities and villages are scattered all across the riverbed. As the population grows and cities expand, the farmland diminishes. In fact, the problem is so bad that every year since the 90s, Egypt's 40,000 square kilometer of arable land has been shrinking by 2%. Do you see the problem? Well, if you don't, let me help you out. Not only does Egypt have more mouths to feed every year, but it's also losing valuable farmland. It doesn't take an expert to realize that if something isn't done immediately, this problem will lead to a systemic collapse. For the past 30 years, Egypt has relied on imports. In fact, in 2023, Egypt imports half of its food requirements. To make matters worse, almost 97% of the country's wheat, around $4.53 billion, is imported, placing it over $1 billion ahead of Nigeria, the first runner-up. So when you're spending $15 billion a year on imports, and they're unreliable, as was the case with Ukraine and Russia's wheat export crisis in 2022, you begin looking at other options. And one of those would be to create new farmland using the water from the Nile River. Inspired by its success from 2015 to 2020, irrigating 5,000 square kilometers of desert land along the Nile River, they began began looking at irrigation alternatives. You don't have to be an expert to realize that if you take $10 billion out of the annual $15 billion you spend on food imports to become crop self-sufficient, you'll fix a major problem in your country. And Egypt is doing precisely that. So in 2021, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi announced the construction of the new Nile Delta as part of his Egypt Vision 2030. Not only will the new delta provide food security, but it will also bring Egypt closer to achieving the goal of having 63,000 square kilometers of agricultural land by 2030 and feeding millions. As a result, Egypt is expected to grow its exports from 6.5 million tons of exported agricultural products in 2022 to 13 million tons in 2030. As a result, its exports will grow from $3.3 billion to almost $7 billion. And this means around 5 million new jobs for Egypt's population. The question now is, can Egypt build this massive mega project in time? In March 2023, around 2 years after announcing the project, the Egyptian government revealed that the artificial riverbed was 65% complete and 35% of the pipes were laid. In fact, in the past 2 years, satellite images of the project revealed these long-winded rows of pipes stretching as far as the eye can see were posted online. Last year in June, fresh water flowed into the riverbed for the very first time. And if we go to the Al Hammam water treatment plant, we'll notice that the project is advancing nicely. And of course, construction on the second smaller river on the east is also underway with pipes and infrastructure already in place. The government began irrigating small circles of land and turning desert sand into lush green farmland. But this is just part of the project. In the coming years, it's safe to assume that Egypt will not follow the catastrophic fate of its Ethiopian counterpart. In 2011, Ethiopia wanted to build a dam that would double the country's electricity capacity and provide power to 60% of its population. As the largest hydropower project in Africa, the cost of GERD, or Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, was set at $5 billion, and it was supposed to be completed in the coming years. However, the project became a phenomenal failure, not because they failed to build it. The project is 90% complete as of 2023. No, the dam is a failure because it soured relations between Egypt and Ethiopia. You see, to fill up the dam's reservoir, Ethiopia needed to impede the flow of the Nile, and Egypt was outraged. Less water at the source would mean less water for Egypt. Since the country was facing a water deficit at the time, they tried to veto the project, pointing to the 1929 Nile Waters Agreement, signed between Egypt and colonial Britain. But Ethiopia didn't listen, mainly because it's not part of the agreement. Leaving them with no other diplomatic alternatives, Egypt threatened to use military force and destroy the dam with missiles. This Lex Luthor-like plan destroyed relations between the two countries. Even after a decade of communication, the two countries can't see eye to eye. Meanwhile, Ethiopia completed 4 rounds of reservoir filling, which diminished Egypt's water supply, putting additional pressure on Egypt to build the artificial river. But what do you think? Will Egypt construct the largest artificial river in the world to irrigate crops that will feed its people, or will they fail because of Ethiopia's dam? Now, here's another video mega project enthusiasts enjoyed watching. Bye for now.